Welcome, brave souls, to the Dark Whisperer's House of Horror, where shadows dance and secrets lurk.
The sun dipped low on the horizon, casting the landscape in a surreal glow of fiery orange and deep purple. Shadows stretched long and thin across the winding rural road as Emma, Lily, and Sarah sped along in their car. The hum of the engine was accompanied by the occasional crunch of gravel under the tires, a sound that seemed to echo unnaturally in the still evening air. On either side of the road, dense trees loomed like silent sentinels, their twisted branches clawing at the sky. The faint scent of pine mingled with something less pleasant, a hint of decay, carried on an unseen breeze. Overhead, the sky seemed almost too vivid, as if painted in hues meant to distract from the unsettling quiet creeping in around them. Even the chirping of birds had ceased, leaving only the soft rustle of leaves as a backdrop to their journey. Excitement buzzed through the car as they anticipated their luxurious weekend getaway at Serenity Springs Resort, a secluded paradise boasting infinity pools and gourmet dining. The GPS chirped directions, but Lily, who was driving, squinted at the map on her phone. "This road looks like a shortcut," she said confidently, veering onto a narrower path flanked by dense woods. "Are you sure?" Emma asked from the passenger seat, brushing back her dark curls. "The GPS says to stay on the main road." "Come on," Lily grinned. "What's the worst that can happen? We'll save time." The laughter and banter soon faded as the road grew bumpier, the crunch of gravel under the car tires echoing ominously in the dense silence. The trees closed in on either side, their gnarled branches forming skeletal arches overhead. Leaves rustled faintly, as though moved by unseen hands, and the occasional distant crack of a twig added an eerie undertone. The oppressive darkness seemed to swallow the headlights, and the scent of damp earth and decaying foliage filled the air. Somewhere in the distance, an owl hooted, its mournful cry piercing the thick, silent night. The GPS lost signal. An uneasy silence settled in as twilight descended. Shadows danced in the corners of their vision, and the oppressive canopy of trees seemed to press closer. Suddenly, the car shuddered and rolled to a halt. "You've got to be kidding me," Sarah groaned from the back seat, running her fingers through her blonde hair. The air around them seemed unnaturally still. Lily tried the ignition, but the engine sputtered and died. They climbed out and inspected the car. A flat tire was the least of their problems, smoke curled faintly from under the hood, carrying with it the acrid smell of burning oil. "This isn't good," Lily muttered, reaching for her phone. "No signal." "We passed a small town a few miles back," Emma said. "Let's walk there and get help." They grabbed their jackets and a flashlight from the trunk. As they walked back along the desolate road, the rustle of leaves and the occasional hoot of an owl were the only sounds. Emma couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched. A pale moon began to rise, casting an eerie silver light over their surroundings. In its glow, shadows seemed to stretch and twist unnaturally, forming fleeting shapes that vanished when looked at directly. The trio trudged back along the darkening road, flashlights slicing through the dense, creeping shadows. Gravel crunched beneath their shoes, the sound unnaturally loud in the oppressive silence. The occasional rustle of leaves in the breeze seemed to mimic faint whispers, and every so often, an indistinct shape would dart just beyond the beam of light, vanishing before they could focus. The air felt colder, sharper, carrying an unplaceable metallic tang that made their breaths hitch. Overhead, branches twisted together like skeletal fingers blocking out the moonlight, which only occasionally broke through to cast eerie, silvery pools that seemed to writhe and shimmer. Emma glanced behind them and froze for a moment, certain she saw a figure far down the road, standing motionless. But when she blinked, it was gone, leaving only the darkness. After what felt like an eternity, they reached the outskirts of the town. It appeared quaint, almost picturesque, with old-fashioned streetlights casting a warm glow on cobblestone streets. Shops lined the main road, their windows showcasing goods that seemed frozen in time. Yet, something was off. The streets were empty, the air heavy with an unsettling silence. "Where is everyone?" Sarah whispered, her breath fogging in the cool night air. A lone mechanic's garage stood at the end of the street. A dim light flickered inside. A wiry man in greasy overalls emerged as they approached, his face pale and gaunt. "Evening, ladies." "Trouble on the road?" he asked, his voice raspy and strained, as though unused to speaking. "Our car broke down," Lily explained. "Can you tow it?" "Sure thing," he replied, glancing nervously at the darkened streets behind them. "But it'll take until tomorrow to fix. You'll need a place to stay." The friends exchanged uneasy glances. "Is there a hotel nearby?" Emma asked. The man hesitated, his eyes flicking toward the edge of town. "Only place with beds is the old guest house up the hill. Used to belong to a scientist. You'll find the key in the mailbox." "Thank you," Lily said, though his expression made her stomach twist. As they turned to leave, the mechanic's muttered words lingered in the air, "Stay safe." As they walked through the town toward the hill, the pale moonlight revealed unsettling details. The mannequins in shop windows seemed too lifelike, their faces frozen in expressions of terror. Shadows darted at the edges of their vision, and the warm glow of the streetlight seemed to flicker coldly. Emma thought she saw a figure watching from an upstairs window, but when she blinked, it was gone. The guest house loomed ahead, a hulking silhouette against the starry sky, its jagged outline resembling the spine of some monstrous creature. The windows were dark and unevenly spaced, like empty eye sockets, and ivy snaked up the weathered wooden walls, its leaves fluttering eerily in the cool breeze. The moonlight painted the structure in cold silver, accentuating every crack and crevice, while shadows seemed to pool unnaturally around its base. The air grew colder with each step toward the house. The crunch of gravel beneath their feet was unnervingly loud, and even the faintest sound, a distant creak, a rustling leaf, seemed amplified in the stillness. The girls exchanged uneasy glances as they climbed the creaking steps of the porch, which sagged ominously under their weight. Faint, almost imperceptible whispers seemed to drift on the air, emanating from nowhere and everywhere at once. The scent of damp wood and mildew clung to the house, mingled with something fouler, a hint of decay that made Sarah gag. Emma retrieved the key from the mailbox, as instructed. It was a brass key, unusually ornate, with an intricate design of intertwining vines engraved on its bow. Oddly, it felt warm in Emma's hand, as though alive. Inside, the house was an oppressive time capsule, steeped in darkness and silence. The chandelier in the entryway hung at an angle, its crystals catching the faint moonlight filtering through cracked windows. The wooden floors groaned beneath their feet, as if protesting their presence. The air was thick with the smell of dust and disuse, but beneath it lingered a sharper, more acrid odor, reminiscent of burned metal. Portraits lined the walls, their subjects' faces partially obscured by shadows. Yet, as the girls moved, the eyes in the paintings seemed to track their movements, a detail that none dared to voice aloud. A grandfather clock stood at the end of the hall, its pendulum still, but the faint sound of ticking echoed from somewhere, growing louder and fainter as though the house itself was breathing. "This place is creepy," Sarah whispered, her voice trembling and echoing unnaturally in the cavernous space. "It's just old," Emma said, though her voice lacked conviction. The oppressive atmosphere pressed down on them, making every breath feel laboured. Then, from somewhere deep within the house, came a sound. It was faint at first, a soft, rhythmic creaking, like a rocking chair swaying in the distance. The sound grew louder, accompanied by faint whispers that seemed to float just out of comprehension. A deep, cruel laugh suddenly pierced the air, echoing through the halls with a resonance that sent chills racing down their spines. It was a laugh devoid of humor, brimming with malice. "Did you hear that?" Lily asked, her voice barely audible over the pounding of her heart. Before anyone could respond, a voice boomed through the house, resonating as if it came from the very walls themselves, "Leave now." The command was filled with such raw, guttural menace that the girls instinctively huddled together. A door upstairs slammed shut with enough force to rattle the floorboards beneath their feet. The sound reverberated through the house like a gunshot. We need to go," Sarah stammered, her voice breaking. They turned toward the front door, but it creaked closed on its own, the sound slow and deliberate, as if the house itself was savoring their terror. The lock clicked into place with an unnatural finality. Outside, the moonlight streamed through the windows, casting grotesquely elongated shadows that seemed to writhe and shift of their own accord. Emma's gaze was drawn to the window, and for a fleeting moment, she saw distorted faces reflected in the glass. They were the faces of townsfolk, but horribly twisted, hollow eyes, sagging skin, and mouths stretched open in silent screams. The image vanished as quickly as it appeared, leaving Emma trembling and breathless. "We're not alone," she whispered, clutching Lily's arm tightly. The house seemed to groan in response, the very walls closing in around them. Inside, the house was eerily preserved. Dust coated the furniture, but everything seemed untouched, a time capsule of the scientist's life. A chandelier hung precariously above the entryway, its crystals catching faint moonlight. The walls were lined with faded portraits, their subjects' eyes seeming to follow the girls as they moved. "This place is creepy," Sarah whispered, her voice echoing. "It's just old," Emma said, though she didn't sound convinced. The air grew heavy, the silence oppressive. Suddenly, faint whispers floated through the air, unintelligible but insistent. A deep, cruel laugh echoed from nowhere, sending chills down their spines. "Did you hear that?" Lily asked, her face pale. Before anyone could answer, a voice boomed through the house.
You've made it through the house of horror, for now. But remember, the darkness is never far, and the whispers, they're always watching. Subscribe to Dark Whispers if you dare, and prepare